Greetings. Welcome to the How We Do Digital Ministry podcast. I'm Christopher Harris, founder of Faith Growth, faithgrowth.com, where we help church clients build their digital presence and engage with their community online. On this podcast, I have a conversation with a church leader and ask them to share how they do digital ministry in their own community. Today, I'm talking with Pastor Wesley from Grace Lutheran Church in Upland, California. Can you introduce yourself, Pastor Wesley, and tell us how you do digital ministry?
Hi, Christopher. Thank you for inviting me to have a conversation with you. And so I serve as pastor to Grace Lutheran Church in Upland, California. And, for digital ministry, we share our worship, our Sunday morning worship in English and in Spanish online. We share the video, we live stream. We started live streaming at the beginning of the pandemic, as many other churches did. And we decided not to pre-record. We decided to go with the live stream. And I know there's a little bit of a debate about that as to which one's better. I don't really know for sure, but we decided to go with live stream because we figured that once we could have more in-person worship, it wouldn't be any extra work. We'd be prepared to be able to share our worship live. And that has worked well for us because about 9 months ago, at the end of September 2020, the rules modified so that churches could have outdoor worship, in-person outdoor. And so we have been live streaming our in-person outdoor worship with everyone's distanced and with masks. And we've been doing that now, I guess, for about 6 months. The sermon we take separately, and that's a podcast. And then we also share as a video our Bible study and share it as a podcast. Doing our children's education, also sharing. We recorded, and then so a lot of different ministries we're now recording and sharing online.
Oh, wow. Sounds exciting. So tell me a little bit, just like, what has the journey been like this past year, since you were not able to start worshiping in person to kind of today, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned, or some of the, maybe something surprising or unexpected that's happened in this last year?
Yeah, well, there's been some surprises this past year. We were fortunate in that we were working with you, Christopher, before the pandemic. And so we had a good website in place, and we had the plan to start podcasting sermons. So that was a huge blessing. We had upgraded our internet connection, and that all really allowed us to be able to live stream and to be able to post those things to our website. And so really, it's just been about trying to connect with people and share a message of hope, and to have a place where people could find that, not just depending on social networks, although they're definitely important, but we really enjoy that, we have our website where we can aggregate all of our different digital ministries.
Kind of like your digital home in the cloud, so to speak, there. Or
Exactly.
The church in the cloud, a nice place for y'all to gather there.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is your volunteer structure like that? Because I know you're not doing it all alone. Tell me, how have you kind of staffed up equipped the volunteers, and because y'all are doing a lot of really exciting ministry online. What do you have by way of volunteers to support that?
Well, we are just so blessed by our volunteers, massively. We have members, mostly all members of the church, who have expertise, some with computers and more IT. We have a very strong leader who had background in television and in sports, recently in sports. And so he had a lot of time on his hands because, most sporting events were canceled at first.
Mhm.
So he was very instrumental in getting our live streaming of the service. And then in addition to that, we have slowly gotten more volunteers to help with the whole production. So we have someone on cameras on Sunday. We have someone on the soundboard. Our leader is, as I was referring to earlier, is Chris, who had a background in television. And while he has the expertise to do most of it, we've been lifting him up as a facilitator, as a teacher, to teach our volunteers. So we're still growing in that area. We need more volunteers, like all churches. There you can always use the volunteers, but we're off to a good start.
Well, it's good that y'all are, you have somebody kind of teaching and keep, it's that way you can have more people involved. I didn't say that eloquently, but I like that his job is more teaching other people than just doing it, which I think that will serve you well in the long term. And I know, does this committee, because I know when we were working together last year, this committee was meeting almost weekly on a Zoom just to do some planning and stuff. Are y'all still doing that, or how does that work?
Yeah, we did. And that's, again, that started when we were doing our coaching program with you. It was 10 weeks of meeting at the same time every week. And when those 10 weeks were over, we just kept meeting Wednesday mornings at 10:30. And the scope expanded beyond redoing our website to, how do we live stream services and connect with people online? So yeah, we're now beyond a year of having a standing weekly, we call it Worship Website Wednesday. That's our little term. And so it's every Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning. We meet via Zoom, and we have staff people on the call, and we have volunteers, and it's a good way for us. We'll oftentimes look at clips from the previous Sunday's worship, maybe something that was really well, maybe something we want to improve on. So it gives us a chance to just constantly evaluate and try to improve.
Cool. So tell me, what has it been like as, you've put more and more programs available online, what has it been like, actually connecting with your members and perhaps even connecting with new people? Are you finding that you're able to connect and online?
That's a great question. And I think it's hard, to be honest. It's just hard to connect at all living in a time of pandemic, but it's so important. And so I will say one area that has worked well is we do live stream on Facebook. And I would say that is a strong point of live streaming, because that's, of all the different ways that we share, that's where we get the most comments, and there's definitely a community now of members and potential new members who talk to each other, during the worship. They're commenting, tagging each other, greeting each other, so that's probably been the strongest place that we've developed the online community. And we're I wouldn't say struggling, but we are wanting to try to connect more to the folks who are listening to our podcast. The analytics tell us there's quite a few people, but we'd like to get to know them more. And that's, we recently started, I'll just pull up, we got a phone number. It's a Google Voice number. Okay. So we're able to check the text messages, various different people. And so we're hoping to connect more.
Yeah, I was curious. I happened to catch part of y'all's live stream this past Sunday on Facebook, and I saw not you had that number scrolling too
Yeah.
at the bottom, and I was wondering how that's been. How long have y'all been doing the number, and how is that going so far?
We've only been doing it a little over a week,
Okay.
so it's brand new. And we have gotten some messages that the first ones were all from current members,
Mm-hmm.
which I actually think is a good thing because it shows that our members are, behind us and they want us to succeed. And so we're gonna keep trying and hopefully get some of the new people who are watching and listening and get to know who they are. Yeah.
No, that's cool. I mean, I'm glad that people are responding. I mean, that's part of it. We put stuff out there, and sometimes it's just an experiment to see if it's going to connect. And it
Yeah.
seems like this is getting some legs. We'll have to see where it goes. Y'all have to see where it goes. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, and I hadn't thought of that one before. That's a good way to use a Google Voice number, because I always forget that you can text with a Google Voice number as well. So I like that. I'm going to remember that.
All right.
Share that with some other churches out there. So as we think, hey, it's last well, in March, it was kind of a year since pandemic really came to the United States, and celebrating the second Easter kind of in a different way. But I would say we're kind of at a point where we're starting to look a little bit forward and everything. What are y'all planning, maybe as far as digital is concerned over the next year to 2 years, or have y'all had time to think that far yet?
Well, it's a good question. So we want to be on more platforms. For most of the past year, we were only on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and we recently started YouTube as well. And people have been asking for a long time, but it honestly it took us time to just figure out how to do a dependable live stream every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Now that seems to be established and pretty good quality, if I may say so, now we want to be on more platforms that offer ways of sharing video. That's a goal of ours. Another goal that we have is we want to play well with others. And by that, I mean, I think that our online digital ministry will only improve if we are networked with other churches that share our values and our theology, other Lutheran churches, obviously. We want to be neighborly and help our local parishes and congregations, because I think we can support one another online. A rising tide raises all boats.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a goal of ours, is to be collaborative beyond just our context, but be working with other churches.
Well, to me, that's something that is exciting about digital ministry that I hope, once pandemic is a little bit more past us, right now it's just been, for a year, the church has really just been about, we got to get it done. And now maybe we can get more strategic, because I think churches working together, being able to share the resources, because sometimes I think churches are too much of their own little bubble. And, and now this way we can share those. It's much easier to share those resources. We don't actually have to get in the car and drive to the next city over, but we could do a Zoom Bible study together or something like that. And so I agree with you. I think there's a lot of potential when we start coming together and doing some joint digital ministry.
Yeah.
What do you think the church will look like in 10 years from today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it ties right into what we were talking about. My hope is that we would be able to create I don't want to say our own, I hope that we would be able to create a social network that blesses the world, to avoid that insular language. So long term, 10 years, I hope that we're not so dependent on the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the Vimeos and the Instagrams of the world, they'll still have a place. But rather than thinking, hey, what's our page on those platforms, I would like us to have our own platform, to steward a platform that non-churchgoers want to be a part of. It's a way of evangelizing. Especially when we think of the some of the challenges that come with social networks that we've been dealing with as a culture. I think that the church is a social network. Whether we're digital or not, we are a social network. 2,000 years in the making for Christians, and even longer than that when we look at our spiritual forefathers in Judaism. We are a social network that has existed for millennia. So I hope that we can translate that into the digital space.
Yes.
That's what I'd like to see happen. And that's only going to happen by churches working together.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think that's an important point you bring up about that the church is a social network. And that's one of the things that, and I know you've heard me say something along these lines before, but, a lot of times I think as a church, we get a little overwhelmed because, the technology is new. But what brings me comfort is the story is not new. The fact that we know how to do relationships is not new. And it's just that, so we really know how to do ministry. There's just a little bit different tool, and we need to share that story on some digital sources. And so everything that we know and all of our history comes with us to this new place. And so to me, I think there's hope in that, as opposed to there was a time that you maybe didn't know how to use a computer or a word processor or something like that, especially if you grew up as a typewriter, but you learned how to use a word processor. And I really think that's a lot of the digital. Anyways, that's kind of a side note, a tangent, I'm sorry. But it's just one of those hot buttons that I think we really do. We know how to do church, and doing it online doesn't really change church. It just is a new tool that helps us connect. You mentioned, in your answer about that, that this platform that the churches would have and steward online. And it kind of makes me think a little bit of, a denominational structure, or, I guess I see this possibility that if we really were to steward a platform for like this, it's more that it's really more than the building or anything like that. And it's the church literally saying, here's how we can evangelize and connect, and possibly could become, an incarnation online. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, it is. It is, So for example, like, looking at church history, after the Roman Empire fell, there was a power vacuum, and there wasn't a structure in place in much of Europe and other places in the world. And a lot of people went to churches and to look for structure to hold together, the fabric of society. And, when we think about online, there is it's still the Wild West in many ways. There's no central structure. And I think we're grappling with that. I don't know that the church is called to be a central structure for the internet, but we could at least be a place that provides structure and a way of interacting online that is compassionate and caring, and available to all. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it does. I kind of, yeah. Like you said, it is kind of the Wild Wild West. And so what happened, we have things that we believe that inform our actions. And so what if we bring those actions, that the poor are always with us, that we're advocating for the least of these, and we're tearing down unjust structures. And so how do we make this safe place where people are welcome? No, I love that. Because it's becoming an outpost online, just another place for us to live out and live out the kingdom and help co-create that with God, and with our fellow siblings in Christ. At least that's what I heard you say.
Yeah, it is. No, it is.
I just
And
gave it some theological or some fun,
yeah,
flowery language, right? Uh,
yeah, theological language is good.
yes. Tell me a little bit about, because I know that your church does some things in English and Spanish, and what is it like kind of being online in two languages?
Yeah, well, it's good. It's really good. It's a blessing, I would say. Um, I think that there's the value in trying to do ministry in more than one language is that it helps us be humble. It helps us, when we struggle to understand a language that's not our first. I think it opens up our heart to acknowledge that, how much we need God's grace, and how God is loves all people, all nations, all cultures. And there's so many languages, so to just try to, use the gifts that we have from God, I think it's very rewarding.
Well, and I like, yeah, and I like kind of what you said there, this reminding, it's all cultures, all languages, God loves that. Because just like with many other institutions in our society, um, I mean, a lot of the internet was built by white men in Southern Cal or Northern California, and so that is kind of the normative culture online. But it's really a small percentage of the world and a small percentage of God's creation. So that's a good reminder, and I would assume that you kind of interacting in both languages with different people are reminded of it more often than perhaps I am, being a monolingual individual.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, the that's a good point too about who designed the internet. And what you made me think about was that, so one of our volunteers at church, one of our members, who's his name is Brian, and he's our leader for IT and computers and tech. Um, he really has a passion for wanting to teach technology basics to people who maybe don't have access, who wouldn't otherwise have access to learn those skill sets, because there's a lot of opportunity for jobs and business. And so one of the visions he brings to the church would be, as we develop our own capacity, we could be training young people, and so as insofar as we're doing outreach and being mission oriented, if we're getting young people who maybe um, wouldn't normally have access to all those things, they might find that through the church. So the church becomes a way of actually teaching practical technical skills that will result in material opportunity for people.
I love that idea. And honestly, it'll only help us, the church, learn it better if we are able to teach it too. Um, that's that is a very, it's a wonderful vision that he has, and I hope that y'all are able to start moving and seeing about starting something like that, because I think that would be very powerful.
And it would help if we had someone who was very knowledgeable about the internet and building websites to be a collaborator. Someone like you.
I know someone like, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, and I even know someone else that might be interested in a project like that in Baltimore, and he is a coder, so that's what he's trained at. And he would, so, kind of the hardware side, the software side, there's some opportunity there. And I'm even thinking that where, there's been a big discussion, is college worth it? And without kind of going into that, I'm like, but I do see that this could be an avenue for certain people. That college might be prohibitive, and I mean, right now, technology is still one of the few places that accreditation is not necessary, as long as you can, if you can show up and do it, you're qualified. If you can't do it, you can't do it. And so the credentials are less important right now. So it would be a good time for people that don't have that opportunity to get the credentials or the money to go to the big schools and things like that to be equipped to have a good career. And yeah. So unfortunately, Wesley, we are out of time. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for this great conversation. It's always fun when we talk and dream about where the church is headed. I want to invite all of our listeners out there to follow and subscribe to our podcast. And Pastor Wesley, how can our listeners find and follow you online?
Yeah, thank you. You can find us online at graceupland.org. You can text us at 909-683-1182, our new Google Voice text app, 909-683-1182. You just say hello or give a prayer request, and we will include those prayers in our worshiping life together.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank all of our listeners for listening today. We'd love to connect with you in other ways. And one of those is we'd like to ask you to join our private Facebook group called How We Do Digital Ministry. So in between podcast episodes, you can interact with other colleagues and share tips and tricks on how to do things, how to do digital ministry. The link will be in the show notes. We'd love to see you in the Facebook group. Also, if you or someone you know is doing something great in digital ministry, let us know. We're always looking for guests to be on the show and share their stories. Blessings to you all.